Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the 27th SF Indie Fest. The festival is going on February 6th through 18th in San Francisco at the historic Roxy Theater, as well as digitally in your computer screens. A huge thank you to our audience members for tuning in, and a huge welcome to our documentary shorts filmmakers. My name is Sarah Marie Flores. I program the shorts here at SF Indie Fest. I'm so excited to get to meet all these filmmakers. I would love to start things off by asking our filmmakers to tell us who they are and why they're here and what they're doing. So, Andalusia, I'd love to start with you. Tell us, what's your name? What film are you here with? What did you do? And what was the genesis of this project for you?
Great. Thanks for having me here. My name is Andalusia K. Soloff. I am originally from New York City, but have been living and working in Mexico for the past 15 years. I am both the director and producer of the independent film Papi Crash, or La Raya, as it's known in Spanish. I made this film because I was working a lot in a state of Mexico called Guerrero, largely on security issues, on disappearances. And I started to realize how much growing poppy for heroin production was a normal part of life in the very isolated mountains of this state. And then all of a sudden, there was a crash where everyone was saying how no one wanted to buy the poppy that they growed. That they were growing, that they had replaced their natural crops, corn, beans, etc., to grow poppy to meet an increasing demand in the United States for heroin. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, no one wanted the poppy because fentanyl had largely replaced the natural heroin that they were growing. So
Yeah,
I wanted to
what
show
made you want to tell this story? Thank you so much.
I wanted to tell this story because I think it's in the US, it's such a horrible crisis of the opiate crisis and how many lives have been lost. But I think no one really thinks about what happens to the people who grow these drugs, who are often, of course, criminalized for growing these crops. And then also what it is that makes them grow these crops, and how the people who grow them actually, they don't even really know what heroin is. They've never used it. They are just part of an enormous global drug trade where they are the last rung of it, and that this quote unquote war on drugs that has been going on for so long really has just provoked more violence and has not neither helped stop the import of drugs into the US nor helped the lives of all the people who are dependent on the trafficking of drugs for their
Yes,
survival.
sorry, I think how did you meet your subjects? How did you get into connecting of telling the story beyond the larger actual issues? Like, how did this find you as a filmmaker?
Yes, it was fairly difficult to find the right community to be able to film this. As I mentioned, I'm the producer and the director. It was very often we were just two people making this film because you can't go in with an enormous crew into a community that is a poppy producing community in the middle of nowhere where there's no phone service. There's the community doesn't even appear on Google Maps. I just went repeatedly to like small towns, and finally I found there was a road blockade where farmers were demanding fertilizer from the government to grow their corn crops. And I little by little started talking to people. One of them heard my accent and said, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Queens, New York." And he said, "I lived in Queens, New York." And we hit it off, and I said, "Can I come visit your town?" without really explaining what I was doing. And he said, "Sure." And then once I visited, I started explaining what I was doing and how I really want to show a more nuanced perspective on poppy crops and the people who live off of this opiate production. And so it was over 5 years of filming. I first made a short version for The Intercept, and then made a longer short version. It's a 27-minute film that has now been circulating around the world, showing this other perspective on the global drug trade.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Hi,
Thank you for
Paul.
having me.
Welcome. Please
Hello.
introduce yourselves. Tell us your movie. Tell us what you did and how this story came together for you. Thank
Sure.
you.
I'm Paul Lovelace, a co-director and co-producer of My Back Pages, along with Nick Canfield. And I got to know the film's subject, Mitch Blank, who's sort of this like legendary figure in the Bob Dylan stratosphere as this collector. I've known him through a previous film. and spent a lot of time at his Greenwich Village apartment, and just, was aware of just the sheer volume and originality. And that always struck me. And then Mitch's generosity as someone who just lets people come by and like work with his materials, like live in his materials. He just always seemed like someone who'd make a wonderful subject for a film. And whenever Nick and I found out he was donating his collection to the Bob Dylan Center in Tulsa, we figured that would be a great opportunity to make this film about Mitch, essentially, letting go. And that was sort of like the big theme, in addition to Mitch being this colorful character, the idea of building up this life's work, and you reach a point in your life where you have to decide what to do with it. And we thought that that would be a really important moment to capture.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's such a sweet story.
Thanks.
We'll chat more about it soon. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Josh. Please introduce yourself and your film and your role, and tell us what the genesis was of this project for you.
Cool. Thank you. I'm Josh Eisenberg, director of Town Square. And I discovered the story of Town Square through a very short article in The Atlantic in 2016. I think it was 2016, maybe 2017. Just describing Scott Tardy and his team's plan to build this fake city for folks with Alzheimer's and dementia, or maybe fake is not the right word, replica city. And, I'm interested in stories about both transformation, the concept of transformation. So the idea of people dealing with these neurological diseases, like going to this place and coming out somewhat different, was interesting to me. And then also exploring the far edges of therapy and ideas to kind of remediate some illnesses that sort of seem intractable. Like I'd worked on a film about using surfing to deal with PTSD from combat, and using rollerblading to deal with midlife crisis and aging in general. So this was sort of a part with that. And I reached out to Scott and his team to work on this film. They let us come film with them kind of from day one, before they even had a space they were building out. And we filmed for quite a long time. And actually, I think the journey of the documentary in some ways was actually trying to winnow down the massive amount of footage and story we had into a 30-minute film. And then, I could, maybe this isn't the right arena for it, but I think that the bigger challenge was finding families who are dealing with a loved one with Alzheimer's and dementia, and convincing them to let us in bed with them, because it's a very vulnerable place to be in life. And we're sort of showing somebody who is not at their best. And so that was a whole nother story. And it took a while to find people who are sort of willing to let us do that.
Of course. Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, and it is all about gaining trust with your subjects, especially when they're in these kind of positions in life. And I think, Sheila, you can definitely attest to that through your film. So I'd love to jump over to you, have you introduce yourself and your film and your role, and talk about how the story came together for you.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Sheila Sofian. I'm the director, producer, and animator for Disabled: A Love Story. And the subjects of the film was my husband's brother and his wife. So I've known them for many years, and I have been making animated documentaries throughout my career, and so they were very familiar with my work. And we had often talked about making a film about their situation, because she was, when I first met her, she had just been diagnosed with MS, and over the years the disease progressed, and their relationship changed from just being husband wife to caregiver and patient. And so I thought what they had was really beautiful, and I wanted to try to translate that into an animated documentary so people could empathize with both of their situations and understand kind of what they were going through.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us. And last but certainly not least, we have Clarissa and Kent. And I'm going to put it on you two to kind of decide where you want to start with this, because I think that your film is so intertwined from perspectives, but because we are in Kent's POV, it might be appropriate to start with him, but let's just kick off
Start
with
with Kent.
please introduce yourself, film, role, and how did this story come to be for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Kent, and I'm the writer and also subject slash, the star of this quirky little film we did called Ruts. And genesis of it all is that this is my life, moment to moment, every day. So we went to where I'm not every morning, but most mornings having a coffee. And then I'm at my local supermarket shopping for a meal or today's meals or the week, whatever. And then after all is said and done, and the various obstacles that I have to overcome, which are fun and interesting and hopefully entertaining and hopefully makes everybody smile, I need a drink. So I round about on the way home to my little neighborhood bar. And we were fortunate enough to be able to shoot at all of those, locations. And I live out in the suburbs, San Diego. So nobody really knew what to make of us with all the cameras and the lighting and stuff. It was very fun. So the origin of it, this is really the first thing that I ever wrote. My first essential screenplay, and I shelved it because shorts were not a thing, 20 years ago as they are now. And then I ended up randomly landing in Sherman Oaks, suburb of LA, this wonderful writing class where I met all my friends who helped us make this film. And one of those friends is right there next to you, Clarissa Jacobson, who is just one of my favorite people.
The genesis of this is because I'm primarily a screenwriter along with my partner, Shayna Weber, who couldn't be here today because of an emergency. But we really pushed Kent to make this into a short. He had written it, I think he had started to write it as a feature, and we wanted, because we never seen anything like it from his point of view. And also, a lot of films about people that Kent doesn't even like the word disabled. They are depressing. They make the person like they have no faults. And Kent wanted to say, we are just people like you. This film shows Kent, he can be a jerk in the film. He can be a jerk in real life, just like all of us. And sometimes people are afraid to laugh at that. But but that's what it was. That's the genesis of it, because we had never seen something. I mean, there might be something out there, but that's what drew Shane and I to wanting to direct it and help Kent with it, because we loved seeing the world from his perspective, where he's like, and it might offend people. I don't want help, like I get sick of being asked for help, just showing him as a real person. And so it came from class and just seeing this cool insight into this world that we had never seen. So that's where it started. And Twin Bridges writing class, which I've been in for a long time.
I think that it's interesting and also unique and original. I hope it is.
Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, no problem. What I see is everyone's rear end. That's just my natural POV, as you said. And I don't think there's anything out there like it. So again, we're honored to be here and selected SFND. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
we're
you.
so glad to have you. Thank you so much. We'll be back in a moment. I would love to jump back over to Paul and talk a little bit more about the process of working with Mitch, right? Like, in a lot of ways, this is something that he's been doing for such a long part of his life. You have to be dedicated to doing stuff like this, especially when you live in cities like New York and San Francisco. Just like the space that is needed to amass a collection is insane. Can you just tell us about your relationship with Paul and kind of how the story evolved through getting to know him? Or excuse me, not Paul, with Mitch, getting to know him and exploring the archive and kind of this journey to him and donating the material?
Yeah, I mean, Mitch, like I said, Mitch has been a friend for, 15 years now. And I did a previous movie about a radio DJ in New York who had quite significant archive of audio, and Mitch was sort of our making that film. He was like kind of our like mentor, like how to deal with an archive, and he also had quite a bit. So that was sort of like the entry point into him. And he working with him is easy just because he's really open and he likes being around people. He likes sharing his world with people. And if you're over at his apartment, the phone's ringing constantly, the buzzer rings all the time, random people stop by. So working with him was pretty easy. And it's, and the funny part is, I mean, he got rid of something like 10,000 items from his 1-bedroom apartment in New York. And if you go there, I mean, by most standards, I mean, I can see some of your homes, like it would still feel very cluttered right now. So, I mean, there's still like a lot in that apartment. And so it's just who he is, and it's wonderful.
That's so cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Josh, I would love to jump over to you and just like talk about the process of filmmaking in an environment like Town Square, right? Obviously, you have this challenge of working with families who know that they're going through a difficult time. You're working within kind of like a clinical, it's not that the space is clinical, but it is a clinical atmosphere in many ways. They're there and dedicated to caregiving. How did you navigate filmmaking in this environment that kept a sense of trust with your subjects, and also working with subjects that were disoriented and going through this huge shift cognitively in their lives? Like, what was that like for you and your team?
Yeah, I think it was a different experience depending on who we were interacting with. So like the staff and the people who run Town Square is pretty straightforward. We just had to tell them, look, when we're in the way and when we're causing a problem, if we're agitating people, like tell us and we will leave. Like we're not here to film and cause and really disrupt somebody who's dealing with Alzheimer's and dementia. If they're getting upset and you notice that, we miss it. And then we also tried to use our own judgment if we felt like we were, causing distress for somebody in some way. We would sort of recede into the background, our small crew. When we were in people's homes, it was a little easier in some ways. It's a calmer environment. But again, people who are the caregivers, that was really a lot of conversations that were happening off camera about like what the film was about and why we're here and having just a really good open line of dialogue about when we could be there and when we needed to not be there. And then, and which I think applies to like all documentary filmmaking to some degree. And then with the people who had Alzheimer's and dementia, it was a little bit interesting. Some people would forget, of course, who we were. So every day we were there, we'd have to sort of remind, why are you filming me? What are you guys taking photos of? What are you here for? So we had to like kind of have a very short, simple description as to what we were up to, because it wouldn't be helpful to be like, oh yeah, we've been making this multi-year documentary and you've been in a lot of it, So we sort of just come up with a simple answer. And I think a lot of people with Alzheimer's and dementia are constantly getting information that seems new to them. So I think they actually some people become somewhat accustomed to having something that is unusual, like a film crew suddenly there, and they're like, okay. So generally it was fine. There were some times where people dealing with these illnesses can get very agitated too. And so there were times where we had to sort of stop early. We wanted to film. And, of course, it's like, we want to show some of the agitation and some of the issues. So we just had to have a language with the film crew too, as to like, keep rolling or stop, and that was really just a judgment call we had to make based on what felt right or didn't feel right. And I think when we shared the film with all the people who were in it, especially the family members, we were very happy to know that I think everybody felt good about the way they and their family were depicted in the film. Because I didn't know if someone was going to say, hey, you know what, I don't like how we are there. I don't like seeing my dad not being able to remember this or whatever. We were worried about that, and I think everybody's felt like we dignified them. I guess that's the bottom. That's the word was dignity. We just want to preserve dignity of everybody involved to the best of our abilities. So
I think that really does come across. Obviously, it's challenging when you're in it and you're shooting and understanding what that line is between like quote unquote documentary truth, which we all know can be a bit of a farce at times. But like being as respectful to your subjects, of their health and safety, it really comes across that it's a very lovingly constructed film. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks.
Sheila, I would love to talk a little bit more about what this journey was like for you with John and Terry. I mean, obviously they're family, but there's this whole other kind of line that is crossed, especially through the fact that it's an animated film, right? Like, did you have early conversations about what the look would be? How did you guide them through the interview process that you then overlay with your animation? Like, how did those elements come together towards? Let's think. I'm sorry. Towards your eventual animation, like, did you have a lot of conversations with them about the way that they would be depicted through kind of the wild audio that you're using?
Well, first of all, I'll say I relate very much to what Josh was saying. It was so important for me that they be respected and that they felt good about the way they were depicted. And the film took a really, really long time to make, and over the time, her condition worsened. And because I was finishing another film while when I interviewed them originally. And I did show them excerpts at the beginning for the first minute or two, and just to make sure that everything was okay, I showed them the script, how I had edited the interview, to make sure that they felt that the important material was there, that nothing was being misconstrued. So I included them more at the beginning, and then I just kind of went on my own and did it, and then I showed it to them when I had the first cut. And it was actually really difficult for John because it had been a long time since Terry had been able to talk like that. She's no longer really able to talk, and she just whispers a little bit and then she loses it. So it was actually really emotional for him. But they both really were impacted by it. They both are very, very supportive, thank goodness, because after all that time, it would have been really unfortunate if they didn't like the way they were depicted in the film. So I felt like at the beginning it was more of a partnership, and then they kind of let me do my thing. They sort of realized it was my film, and they were like, you do what you think is right. And they trusted me because they were familiar with my past work as well.
What a special thing to get to share. Please send them our love. We're so grateful that they shared their story with you and by way us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Clarissa, I would love to jump back over to you and just talk a little bit about the visual language. I mean, obviously, this is all inspired through Kent's POV, but how was that for you as a director, translating that filmographically? That's a word. Let's go with the fact that's a word.
First of all, I have to shout out Kent because it was completely his vision to do it that way. And it was hard. In fact, we had to go back and get more shots, even with a GoPro, because we couldn't get everything the first time through his eyes, and really like figuring out the right angles that, how high is he? How is, what is it like to be in his shoes? It was really interesting and it was fun. And, Kent was a trooper. He had to carry his oxygen around, and then we had to break and everything. And he was a total trooper about it. And it was also like, it was so hot that day. I think it was like 95 degrees,
Yeah,
so
it was a warm day.
it was a warm day. But it was wonderful because it was Kent's vision. It was his idea to do it from that point of view. And we just wanted to do justice to what he sees his world like. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Ken, I would love to just kind of broaden this conversation. I think there is a very large ongoing conversation about how we make filmmaking more accessible. I think, the big buzz thing was, through having like the characters in Wicked, right? Like, how did they make this like billion-dollar franchise accessible? On other scales, I met with an amazing filmmaker in the past couple of weeks named Ariel Basca, who actually described her directing process, where she said, I'm going to make a film and I'm going to make it conform to my needs. How was this for you, being on set do you feel like there's a place for you to continue within filmmaking, and how can we as the filmmaking community make sure that we have more accessible access to filmmaking?
Well, I certainly hope that this is not my one and only shot, but for me, you know what? It was overwhelming because this is a dream for a long time, and I tend to get a little emotional, so don't, you know. But yeah, back at you, baby. No, it was overwhelming. It was fun. It was awesome. I absorbed every second of it. You know, memories last forever. And it was made all the sweeter because my friends were there with me. You know what I mean? I relish the idea that others who have, you know, physical limitations, such as myself, are afforded opportunities now. I think it's a long time coming. I think a lot of it is a lack of just fundamental understanding, because a lot of people aren't real comfortable with people or with situations that they're not, you know, familiar with. And so, therefore, the easy way out of that is just not to deal with it. So, handicapped, you know, disabled people have a lot to offer, and they are all very intelligent, insightful, and I leave myself out of those groups, but they generally are just highly evolved creatures, and you know, the world is a more fulfilling place with all of us included, and offering up our own ideas and our own visions and our hearts. So I hope that answers that.
It does.
But
It's
okay,
beautiful. I mean, I think, you know, at the heart of this, right? We not only get the filmographic perspective that is offered through your vision, but also we are, as an audience, invited to see the world through a completely different mindset. And I think that that's incredibly special.
May I
Thank
add
you
one
so
more thing
much.
real quick?
Yeah, of course, please.
Sorry to interrupt you. I can't take full 100% credit for how the film looks. That is actually Clarissa and Shayna, because you don't see all of me till the end, and that was their idea, and I think that works really well.
Well, we did that because people have a preconceived notion,
Mm-hmm.
you
I mean,
know?
filmmaking is a team sport, and it's so
And
special.
if you don't know what Kent looks like till the end, you can't feel sorry for him. If you see him in the beginning, if you're not used to being around people like Kent, you might feel sorry for him, which he does not want.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't blame him.
Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. That's all the time we have today for our Q&A. A huge thank you to our audience members for your delicious eyeballs and money and support of independent cinema. And to our filmmakers, thank you so much for sharing these stories and being here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Nice
Thank
to meet everybody.
you.
Bye, everyone.